Elias had always believed that life unfolded in predictable shapes, routines, patterns, and responsibilities that built themselves around him like quiet walls, and for many years he accepted those walls without question because he thought they protected him from disappointment. But everything changed the day he met Arya, a woman who carried a calm strength in her presence and a softness in her voice that made people listen even when she spoke very little. Her silence held more meaning than the noise of the world around them. They met on an ordinary afternoon in a small community library. Elias had entered to escape the noise of his thoughts, and she was seated by the far window, reading with gentle focus that seemed to glow in the late sunlight. He did not speak to her that day, but something about her stayed with him, a feeling that he could not define, and for a man who prided himself on clarity, that feeling disturbed him. The next time he went to the library, he found himself searching for her, without admitting it to himself, and when he finally gathered the courage to speak, their first conversation was short but meaningful. Arya had a way of answering that felt like an invitation, not just to talk to her, but to understand something deeper within himself. Elias did not believe in fate, yet he returned again and again, and each time he spoke with her, the invisible walls around him began to soften. Arya was the kind of person who saw beyond what people showed. She noticed fear behind confidence, kindness behind silence, thought behind hesitation. She did not force him to open up, yet somehow, with every passing day, he found himself wanting to share pieces of his life that he had never spoken aloud before. She listened without judgment, offering warmth without expectation, and slowly intimacy began weaving itself through their conversations. But Elias was not a man who surrendered easily to feelings he had been hurt long before in ways that taught him that closeness was dangerous and vulnerability was something to avoid. He had learned to appear strong, to stay composed, to maintain control at all times. And though he never said it out loud, he feared that opening his heart meant losing himself. Yet with Arya, he felt something new, not fear, not confusion, but possibility. And possibility frightened him more than anything, because it meant he had something to hope for, and hope was unfamiliar. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows of the library, Arya closed her book and asked him what he was afraid of. Her question felt simple, but struck him like a quiet storm. He hesitated, but she waited patiently, and for the first time Elias admitted that he feared loving someone, because loving meant losing control, loving meant risking pain, loving meant trusting someone not to break what was fragile inside him. Arya listened gently and told him that love did not require perfection. It required presence, that love was not about controlling outcomes, but about allowing connection to breathe and grow. Elias felt something inside him shift, a realization that he had spent years protecting himself from wounds that no longer existed. Arya did not tell him what to do. She did not demand change. She simply offered understanding, and that understanding softened him in a way nothing else ever had. Days became weeks, and their connection deepened not with dramatic declarations, but in small, quiet moments like the way she smiled when he opened the door for her, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way they shared comfortable silence that felt more meaningful than conversation. Elias began noticing how Arya carried her own unspoken wounds, not displayed openly, but present in the way she sometimes looked out the window, as if remembering something painful. He sensed stories she did not share, yet her strength was not in hiding, but in healing. She was a woman who had lived through heartbreak and loss, and yet still chose kindness, still chose hope, still chose to believe in people. Elias admired that more than he could express. One afternoon, they walked through a botanical garden filled with soft fragrances and golden light filtering through leaves. As they walked, Arya told him that life had taught her that healing was not a destination, but a journey, that every person carried a quiet weight within them, and the real beauty was not in escaping pain, but in learning how to grow through it. Her words resonated with Elias because he had spent years trying to avoid pain, never realizing that avoidance had closed him off from joy. As well, Arya became the first person who made him want to try again, to open his heart, to trust something bigger than fear. He did not tell her this, but he began showing it through small gestures. He looked for opportunities to make her laugh. He made time to listen to her stories. He began choosing to be present rather than withdrawn. He found himself thinking of her in the early mornings when the world was quiet and peaceful, and he found himself wanting to protect her, not because she was weak, but because she was precious to him. One early evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, they sat together on a wooden bench, overlooking the city lights from a distant hill. Elias felt something he had never felt before, not desire, not infatuation, but a sense of belonging, a sense that this woman beside him was becoming a part of his life in ways he had not expected and yet desperately wanted. Arya looked at him softly and said that people come together For reasons sometimes to heal, sometimes to grow, sometimes to walk apart life together, and sometimes to learn what love truly means in its purest, for Elias felt those words settle deeply inside him, and he knew then that what he felt for her was not temporary. It was something growing with quiet strength, something real, something he had only seen in dreams. He never allowed himself to believe. One night, while walking her home, he finally spoke from a place beyond fear. He told her that he was not perfect, that he was still learning, healing, adjusting. But he wanted to try. He wanted to be someone who gave rather than held back, someone who trusted rather than feared, someone who chose love instead of running from it. Arya looked at him with gentle understanding and told him that she did not need him to be perfect. She just needed him to be honest and present. That was a moment Elias realized that love did not begin with certainty. It began with courage, and he felt courage blooming in him. Like a new sunrise as days turned into weeks, Elias and Arya began sharing a rhythm that felt both new and familiar, a connection that flowed gently without being forced, yet deepened with every moment they spent together. Elias found himself waking each morning with an unusual warmth inside him, a feeling he could not name, but one that made the world seem less heavy. He had lived much of his life believing that he needed to carry everything alone. His fears, his worries, his responsibilities, his memories of pain, but being around Arya made him realize that life did not have to be endured alone. Sometimes healing happens simply because someone stood beside you without trying to fix you, without expecting you to be something other than who you were. Arya had that rare ability to make him feel safe without taking away his strength. She made him feel seen without exposing his vulnerabilities. She made him feel understood without needing long explanations, and that quiet comfort began reshaping parts of him he had long ignored. One evening, they decided to visit a small coastal town not far from the city, a quiet place where the ocean met the sky in shades of soft blue and silver. Elias had always found the ocean overwhelming because it reminded him of the things he could not control: the tide, the wind, the storms of depth. Yet walking beside Arya as waves brushed the shore, he felt himself relaxing, as if her calm presence softened even the restlessness inside him. They walked barefoot along the sand, Arya occasionally pausing to pick up a seashell or examine a stone with a childlike curiosity that made him smile. He realized then how beautiful it was to be with someone who had not lost her sense of wonder, someone who still noticed the small, quiet miracles of the world, even after everything she had lived through. At one point, Arya asked him to sit with her near the water edge, and they watched the waves roll in and out the ocean, breathing in an eternal rhythm. She looked at him and said, "Sometimes people fear the depth because they have only ever known drowning, not swimming in those." Words touched a part of Elias he rarely acknowledged, because he too feared depth, not physical depth, but emotional depth. He feared giving too much, feeling too much, needing too much. But Arya made depth feel safe. She made it feel like a place where he could rest, not drown. While they sat there, a soft breeze lifted Arya hair, and Elias found himself quietly admiring her, not only for her beauty, but for her resilience, a resilience that shone even when she was silent. He wondered what pain she had lived, through what storm she had survived, how many moments she spent rebuilding herself piece by piece. He wanted to ask, but he did not push, because he knew she would share when her heart felt ready. As they walked back toward the small town, Arya told him something she rarely shared. She said that for many years she believed she was too broken to be loved, too complicated, too quiet, too emotional, too guarded. But with time, she understood that being broken did not mean being unlovable. It meant she had stories, wounds, wisdom, and strength that shaped her into someone real, someone sincere, someone capable of deep connection. Elias listened carefully and felt a deep respect for her journey, because he too had believed for a long time that he was unworthy of certain things: connection, commitment, belonging. He carried scars. He never spoke about wounds that made him hide behind distance and silence. But Arya's presence made him want to open up, not because she demanded it, but because she invited it gently, naturally, humanly. Over following weeks, their bond deepened in ways neither expected. They shared long walks where the world seemed to fade around them, slow evenings where they talked about life, dreams, fears, and hopes, quiet moments where words felt unnecessary. And the simple comfort being near each other said everything. Elias discovered that love did not need to be dramatic to be powerful. Sometimes its strength came from patience, from presence, from the steady way two people learn to trust each other. He found himself wanting to protect Arya, not from the world, but from her own doubts, wanting to remind her that she was not too broken, not too emotional, not too quiet. She was exactly enough, exactly as she was. One night, they met at a small cafe lit with warm golden lamps and soft music playing in the background. Arya arrived wearing a simple dress, nothing extravagant, yet she looked radiant with softness that made the entire room feel warmer. Elias had something important on his mind, something he had been holding for days, and when she sat across from him with that gentle, attentive expression, he finally let the words come. He told her that he did not want to repeat the mistakes of his past, where he ran from connection whenever it became too real. He told her that he wanted to learn how to stay even when it scared him, to show up even when he felt uncertain of love, without letting fear decide his choices. Arya's eyes softened in a way that made his chest tighten, and she reached across the table, lightly touching his hand, a simple gesture, yet it felt like an entire promise. She told him that she was willing to walk beside him at his pace, that they did not have to rush, that she did not need him to be perfect. She just needed him to be sincere. And that sincerity was something Elias carried naturally, even through his fears. After leaving the cafe, they walked to the quiet night, the air cool and filled with a soft glow of streetlights illuminating the narrow paths of the old neighborhood. Elias felt the heaviness of old fears fading, replaced slowly with something warmer, something steady, as if hope had quietly sat down beside him and decided to stay for the first time in years. He allowed himself to imagine a future where he did not stand alone, but with someone who understood him without trying to reshape him, someone who saw him not as a broken man, but as a man capable of growth, affection, and love. While walking, Arya paused, suddenly looking up at the night sky filled with scattered stars. She told him that the most beautiful thing about the night sky was that light existed even in darkness. Even when everything around seemed shadowed, the stars still found a way to shine. Elias realized she was not talking about the sky, but about life, and maybe about him too. He gently took her hand without overthinking, and she held his back without hesitation. That moment felt small, yet it carried the weight of something meaningful. It felt like a turning point. The first real step into a connection built not on fear, but on choice to trust, choice to open, choice to try. When they reached her doorstep, Arya turned toward him with a softness that felt like a quiet whisper to his heart. She told him that some people walk into our lives as reminders that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, that love can return even when we've given up on it. Elias felt something inside him loosen, something he had held tight for years. And as he looked at her, he realized he didn't just care for her. He cherished her deeply in a way that felt honest, natural, and quietly powerful. It was the beginning of something needed to define with words, because it was already speaking through every glance, every gesture, every breath they shared together. In the days that followed, something quietly shifted between Elias and Arya, not in a dramatic way, but in the soft, steady unfolding that happens when two people begin trusting each other with parts of themselves they once protected fiercely. Elias found himself thinking about her during moments he never expected, while drinking his morning coffee, while walking to work, while sitting in silence before bed, and each thought carried a warmth. He could not deny he had spent so many years believing that deep connection was too fragile, too unpredictable, too dangerous. But Arya made it feel like something worth risking, something worth learning. Again, she was becoming the gentle place where his worries softened, where his fears loosened, where his heart felt understood in ways he had not experienced in a long time. Arya, on her side, felt a quiet hope rising inside her, one she had buried for years. She had built her life with caution, guarding herself from disappointment, from abandonment, from the pain of giving too much to the wrong people. Yet being with Elias made her feel safe enough to lower those walls slowly, carefully, intentionally. His presence was steady, his sincerity real, his vulnerability honest, and she found herself wanting to trust him, not because she needed to, but because he made trust feel natural. One late afternoon, they decided to take a short trip to a nearby forest, a place filled with tall old trees whose branches created a canopy of soft green light. Sunlight filtered through like gentle rain, creating tiny golden patches on a path beneath their feet. Arya loved nature because it reminded her that healing often happens slowly, quietly beneath the surface. Elias walked beside her, listening to the soft crunch of leaves under their shoes, breathing in the fresh earth-scented air. He felt peaceful in a way he had not felt in years, as if the forest itself was reminding him that growth did not require speed, only patience. After walking for a while, they reached a small clearing beside a calm stream, where the water moved with a soft whisper. Arya sat on a smooth stone near the edge, dipping her fingers into the cool water. Elias sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching, but not quite. He glanced at her, noticing how the sunlight danced across her face, giving her an almost ethereal glow. Arya noticed his gaze, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, warm, filled with unspoken emotion. She finally looked into the water and said gently, "Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself." Those words struck Elias deeply. He had carried guilt for many years, guilt for the people He pushed away guilt for the chances. He did not take guilt for the emotions he buried instead of expressing. He whispered quietly, "I think I spent more time blaming myself than trying to understand myself." Arya turned him, her eyes soft with empathy, and she replied, "Understanding yourself is the beginning of healing, and healing is not a destination. It is a journey, one you do not have to walk alone." Anymore Elias felt something pull in his chest, a mix of relief and gratitude, and without thinking, he reached for her hand. She did not hesitate. She intertwined her fingers with his, and in that simple gesture Elias felt a shift inside him, as if the walls that had guarded him for so long finally cracked open, letting warmth flow through days past, and their connection deepened naturally, without pressure, without expectation. They explored small bookshops, cozy cafes, quiet parks, and hidden corners of the city each moment, weaving them closer in a way that felt almost inevitable. Elias found himself sharing parts of his past that he rarely spoke about, moments of lost moments, of failure, moments of fear. Arya listened to him with patience and tenderness, never judging, never rushing, never trying to fix him. She simply stayed with him in his truth, and that was something he had needed more than he ever realized. Arya, too, began opening up about her own scars, her own doubts, her own nights filled with silent fear. She spoke about the times she felt invisible, the years she spent pretending to be strong, while feeling fragile inside. Elias held her words with the same care she offered him, letting her know through his presence that she did not have to be strong all the time, that she could let herself be human with him. One evening, as they walked through a quiet street lit by soft amber streetlights, Elias suddenly stopped. Arya looked at him curiously, and he took a slow breath, gathering his courage. He told her that meeting her had changed something profound inside him, that she brought a sense of peace. He had never known that. She made him want to be better. Not for her, but for himself, because she reminded him that he was worth choosing, worth healing, worth loving. Arya felt tears gather at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the pure sincerity behind his words. She stepped closer and placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She told him that he had given her something she thought she would never feel again, a sense of safety, not the kind that comes from promises, but the kind that comes from presence, from consistency, from small everyday moments that speak louder than grand declarations. She told him that he made her believe in connection again, and trust again, and the possibility of love again. Elias gently cupped her face, his touch careful, almost reverent, as if she were something precious and fragile. And in a way she was, but she was also strong, resilient, filled with quiet fire. They stood there close enough to feel each other's breath, and for the first time in a very long time, Arya let her heart open fully. Elias leaned in, slowly giving her space to pull away, but she didn't. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a soft, slow kiss that felt like healing, like understanding, like two wounded souls finding rest in each other. The world around them faded, replaced by the warmth of that moment, a moment that felt like the beginning of something neither had planned, but both deeply needed. When they pulled away, Arya rested her forehead against his and whispered that sometimes the right people enter our lives not to fix us, but to show us that we were never broken, only waiting for someone to see us clearly. Elias held her close, his arms wrapping around her in a gentle embrace, feeling the weight of loneliness fall away piece by piece. In the following days, they continued growing together, learning each other's rhythms, fears, hopes, and dreams. They talked for hours about the future, not in rigid plans, but in soft possibilities, shared journeys, quiet mornings, laughter-filled evenings, and a life built not on perfection, but on honest connection. Elias realized that the man he was becoming with Arya was someone he liked, someone he could respect, someone who felt real. Arya realized that the love she feared she would never find again was slowly forming, not through grand gestures, but through small, steady moments where she felt seen, valued, and deeply cherished. Their story did not rely on dramatic twists or sudden endings. That unfolded like sunrise, slowly, gently, beautifully, painting their lives with new color, new hope, new meaning. And as they walked forward hand in hand, both understood something quietly powerful. Love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone who makes you feel safe enough to be imperfect, someone who sees your cracks and chooses to stay, someone who turns your fears into courage and your loneliness into home in each other. Elias and Arya found that home not because they needed each other to survive, but because together they learned how to live more fully, more honestly, more beautifully than ever before, and their story was just beginning.